Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 18. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Glad you guys are back with us here for this Wednesday show. And Dave, we will do our best to promise no clerical errors.
You stole my line,
show.
You rat.
That's why I'm the host. I get the C-plus jokes out ahead of time.
Yeah, you stole my open there, you rat. We'll try our best to not make any clerical errors, especially where the salary cap's concerned, Alex, within all that. But, man, I sure am glad we didn't have a podcast to do on Tuesday. I'm glad that this news cycle of, I guess it'd be roughly 48 hours at this point, has run its course, and we're not in between podcast episodes based on what all transpired with the release of the depth chart on which I guess would have started on what was the first day to today's Wednesday, so it would have been
Monday. This came out.
So that didn't go over smooth. Mike Tomlin kind of laughed it off as a cut and paste type error, and but here we are. I think I want to use that carefully. I think we might have the correct version here.
I hope so at this point. We did have our live stream on Monday, and you kind of just, I think, tongue-in-cheek a little bit said, maybe this is a clerical error, but I think this is the way it's going to be, and it ended up being the case. And it ended up just goofing and screwing up the depth chart. So I do want to talk about that in a little bit. I want to start, though, with the big news of yesterday, the Pittsburgh Steelers announcing that Franco Harris's number 32 would be retired. That will officially take place on Christmas Eve. Steelers Raiders on the 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception. So they had teased this special announcement, I believe, on Monday. Didn't know what it would be. Really tight-lipped by the organization. And then the official announcement came yesterday afternoon. So obviously for Steeler fans, they know that retiring numbers is incredibly rare. Only 3 now in team history. Franco, the first offensive player to ever have his number retired, now joining legends in Joe Green and Ernie Stautner. So really cool moment. Great to hear from Franco, and I think a great move overall for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
When I was a kid, back when the earth was still cooling, and you had to be careful not to burn your feet on it when walking around barefoot outside and all, you can only buy 3 jerseys out of the Sears Roebuck catalog. And a catalog used to be this thing that was a lot thicker than a.
You got to explain like all those words: Sears catalog.
Yeah. They called it the wish list catalog. And Alex, I swear that thing was that catalog was a good probably 2 inches thick in color, and definitely bigger than our phone book in Pensacola. So it was a big deal when the Sears and Roebuck catalog came out. The wish list catalog came out every year. You're thumbing through there and looking at things. But back then you could really only get three jerseys, number 12, number 32, and of course number 75. And the first, I ended up having all 3 over, of course, I think like 2 Christmases or something like that, 3 Christmases. But the first one that I got was 32 Franco Harris. So look, they obviously haven't retired, several numbers in the history of the organization, and goes without saying that Joe Green and Ernie Stautner are very deserving there. If you would have bet me though ahead of this, the immaculate, the anniversary of the Immaculate Reception not been close to this, to 50 years, I would have bet you by now that Terry Bradshaw would have been in before Franco Harris. But obviously he's not. I'm not taking issue, mind you, with Franco Harris being the next one up. I think he's very, very deserving. As they said yesterday during a press conference, man, that one play really, kicked things off way back then, and really showed that the Steelers could win or in the early 70s. Obviously, they beat the Raiders in that game, but I think turned around and lost the next game in the playoffs. But I mean, it was a huge first franchise win at that point. Franco obviously went on to have an outstanding career, and it all makes sense for them to retire a number. But I guess dollars to donuts, I would have bet you that he would probably been like the fourth one behind Terry Bradshaw.
And I know Matthew Marksey wrote about that Bradshaw should be next, or strongly considered as one of the future players to have his number retired. I don't know if the, at times, icy relationship Bradshaw seemed to had with the organization has maybe paused some of those, possibilities. And obviously Pittsburgh doesn't get in the habit of retiring numbers too often. Franco's been seemingly closer to the organization overall in his post-retirement life. So maybe there's a little bit of reason for that. But obviously, as you said, Franco, incredibly deserving. It matches up so well with the 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception. And as you mentioned, that was truly a turning point in this organization's history. Obviously, what Chuck Noll built, and there was a lot more that went into building the team beyond just that one singular play. But if you had to point to just one moment when the tide shifted from the old lovable losers of the Steelers from the 30s to the early 70s into the dynasty and the next chapter of the Steelers history, that was the moment, beating the, just the mystique that the Raiders and Ken Stabler and all those guys brought. So well-deserved for Franco Harris, an incredible career, 9-time Pro Bowler, Hall of Famer, at Super Bowl MVP in the team's first Super Bowl win over the Vikings back in 74. So really deserving. And I just love hearing from Franco talk about what that meant to him and meant to just the organization in general.
I don't, and you don't either at this point after doing this so long, probably some hypotheticals just aren't kind of worth, touching or anything like that, especially season to season. What if they would have drafted this guy or signed this guy, that kind of stuff there. But there have been times where I thought to myself, man, what happens, to the Steelers there kind of in the immediate future if they don't win that Immaculate Reception game? Does that change anything? Do they go into the next, rest of the 70s with a little less confidence that they can you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That
Sure.
kind of thing. I mean, it really was that big of a moment in Steelers history. And look, that play and that play alone still remains after all these years, 50 years, as one of the most, if not the most, kind of defining highlight play in the history of the National Football League. And, and with good reason, and on top of it. But I have found myself over the years kind of wondering, man, I wonder if he doesn't, or if it's ruled incomplete or what have you. What would have happened if the Steelers don't beat the Raiders in that game?
I think a couple elements of the Immaculate Reception get lost to the overall mystique of it. Bradshaw scrambling and keeping that play alive. I think that's easily forgotten about in everything that happened after Bradshaw fired. And then
extending the play, brother.
Yeah, there you go. Quarterback mobility and things of that nature, as Mike Tomlin may say. And then also, Franco didn't have necessarily an easy walk-in touchdown the rest of the way. He stiff-armed somebody and had to race into the end zone. And I never realized this. I've seen this play, obviously, a million times. I never even thought about it or saw it until Franco said it yesterday. Harris talked about the key to that play was after the ball hits Jack Tatum, and then there's that collision there with Frenchie Fuqua, the Raiders start celebrating, thinking that ball is incomplete. And that gave Franco just enough of the corner to be able to outrun them into the end zone. If the Raiders don't celebrate there, Franco may not have made it into the end zone. And so I never even, because the clips always are chopped up and you don't really get a good view of it, I never saw that before. So Franco, to me, opened my eyes to a new element of the play that I never considered before.
Well, there was that backup, what was it, tight end too, that was accused of clipping on the play, on the block, halfway during the return there. So there's several elements to it that are quite amazing alone, and some will say, well, if Franco would have blocked correctly coming out of the backfield, maybe Terry wouldn't have been under so much, just little funny things that have kind of surfaced over the years and all. And it is too. And I have tried to Zapruder film that thing from, more than 10 times, I bet. And that's just since I've moved to Vegas 6 years ago. It's just inconclusive about whether, which player it hit first.
I think it hit Tatum. I think that's pretty clear. For the ball to come backwards like that, it's got to hit something that's going forward downhill, sure. And that's Jack Tatum.
Sure. The physics of it tell you that. There's obviously been other NFL shows that have kind of went down that rabbit hole, if you want, and I agree. But it's still by a frame by frame zoom and all like that. It's just the source tape is just too fuzzy, and it's not conclusive enough in that. But it would have had to have been conclusive in today's NFL if you're going to overturn something like that, right?
Right. Well, today would be a legal play because the rule
but
about.
Back then.
But yeah, back then. And anyway, I will just believe that it hit Jack Tatum. I do truly believe that that's the case, and just take that to the grave.
Yeah, and I'm sure the rest of them will as well too. Look, it's not going to go away, that's for sure.
Right. So really cool moment, really cool announcement. Art Rooney saying and showing the team will wear a special patch commemorating Harris's jersey retirement in that Raiders game on December 24th, the day before. So that's going to be, I believe, Friday the 23rd. There'll be a NFL Network, A Football Life on Franco Harris. So really looking forward to that. Rod Woodson also will have one later this month, a Football Life on his career in Pittsburgh and Baltimore, all the other places he ended up.
The tight end was McMacken.
Yeah, John McMacken.
Yeah. That was the one that I was trying to think of. And I think I did something on him. He had one of the longest receptions or biggest explosive plays one of the years for this. I forget, but
that sounds right.
Yeah, that's not the only thing that he was kind of noted for, I guess, is the block that some people say was a clip on the immaculate reception return. But that was the name I was searching for there.
Gotcha. Well, regardless, again, great ceremony, great move by the Steelers. And again, it is so rare. It was Stautner, they retired in 1964, Green in 2014, and then Franco Harris yesterday, the announcement officially happening later this year. So I don't know when the next one will be. Art Rooney said they're going to keep these moments rare. I think that's still the right move overall to make sure they remain special and things like that. But who will be next? Will it be Bradshaw, Ben, Troy, someone else from the 70s? It's going to be a while before we find out, probably another decade or so. But it is interesting to kind of at least speculate about who the next jersey retirement may be.
Man, Alex, pour one out for me when it gets around to Ben, okay? Because I'm probably gonna be pushing up the daisies.
Oh no, Mike! It's like a decade. Do you think they'll retire Ben's number? I think they probably will.
Yeah, at some point, but I don't think I'll be around to see it. It's taken this long. Heck, it's not going to be until after he gets in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So we still got at least 5 years there. You would think within probably the next 5 to 8, 9 years would be when they do the next one. And I would think that it might be Terry Bradshaw. And then who's after him and how long will the wait be? I'm not sure I can make it, Alex.
I don't know if Bradshaw's ever gets retired. I wouldn't be surprised if it remains in that unofficially retired, not issued, but not officially retired category.
You think because of his relationship or what?
I think that, and it's been a long time. They've had plenty of time to decide to do that. And at some point sit there and say, maybe they're just not going to.
Okay.
I think
I would hate that if it came down to that,
And it's also just, they don't retire numbers that often. They're going to do one a decade maybe. And so there's just, you got Ben, you got Troy, Bradshaw. There's only so many times you can do this.
I mean, Terry is who he is now, obviously, and is who he was. But I mean, the guy helped guide that franchise to the four championships there, man. I don't see how you don't do it at some point here.
That's fair. I mean, he's certainly deserving of it. Now, just the question of will they do it given the rare nature of these moments is kind of my point. So we'll see, and we'll find out. You'll be around in 10 years. We'll talk in 10 years and see where this team's at.
All right, you promise?
I promise. All right, Dave. Let's talk about the other news of yesterday. So on Monday, the Steelers released their first regular season depth chart, and it showed the quarterback order going as Mitch Trubisky as the starter, Mason Rudolph as the number 2, and Kenny Pickett as the number 3. And then shortly before Mike Tomlin's press conference on Tuesday, about an hour before, the Steelers had an updated, newly released depth chart showing Pickett as the number 2 and Rudolph as the number 3. Mike Tomlin asked about that to clarify the quarterback situation and said it was a clerical error, that Pickett was supposed to be the number 2, and the team basically just forgot to update their summer depth chart. So the order is going to be Trubisky 1, Pickett 2, and Rudolph 3. Pickett, Trubisky active, Rudolph inactive on game days. And so that's the way that it's going to go. So that's the way that I think at the least it should be. I was really surprised initially, and that's why I was kind of skeptical about that initial depth chart when it came out on Monday about the order of the quarterbacks. I wanted to hear from Mike Tomlin, and Tomlin was able to clear the air.
And for the 18 hours in between that, it was a giant Benny Hill show. And I know you have no idea what the Benny Hill show was.
No, that's the song, right?
Yeah, the Yakety Sax. Yeah. And all. But, oh boy, Twitter burnt down, and it had to be built back brick by brick real quick there. And, as we mentioned you asked me on the live stream the other night if it stands as is, and that's the one, do I buy it? And I said, yeah, I mean, barring if it's a clerical error, I buy it. Well, the clerical error ended up being in there. And he also asked, will Tomlin comment on the 3-quarter on? Did you ask me on 2 or 3 on the quarter? He ended up talking about all 3 quarterbacks, which I thought kudos to him. Right. For him to go through each one the way he did and sort of give an explanation of why they were each. He obviously didn't have to give an explanation why Mason was number 3 because he's number 3 because the other 2 are 1 and 2 there. But I thought the way that Mike handled that press conference before the audio went bad was done extremely well. And I think one of the things that I know I've tried to stress, and I know you've stressed as well, and it relates to Pickett, was the growth that he made in stadium was undeniable, very undeniable. Now you can talk more about from the first snap at training camp until the last snap of training camp or last snap of the preseason, and even probably talk more about the growth that he showed through that realm of it. But I thought just the growth alone in the preseason, which is all I saw, not only was he very poised from snap 1 until snap, 64 or 5, whatever he took there. I thought he remained poised, and I did think that you saw noticeable progression throughout. And I think in so many words, that's what Mike Tomlin said when describing Pickett as the number 2 was the in stadium performances there. So I think they saw what they wanted to see out of him, especially during the preseason. Now I thought Mike Tomlin was telling a lie, because one of the questions he was asked was, were you surprised by anything you saw during the preseason? And not necessarily that Kenny's play would have been a surprise, but you hook him up to a lie detector. There were things that had to surprise Mike Tomlin, I think, during the preseason there, and not necessarily that Kenny's play was one of those things. But I just think maybe perhaps in the manner of the way that those 60 snaps actually went for the kid might have been a little bit surprised, quite honestly.
Yeah, I think maybe more of a pleasant surprise. I mean, remember, this was this team's organization's number one quarterback. I mean, they believed in him so strongly that they, decided to make him the likely, attempted heir to Ben's throne. And so I think they're just more impressed and surprised by maybe any one thing that Pickett did. I mean, he showed the accuracy, the composure, all things that, were attractive to him, to the organization, I should say, coming out of Pittsburgh. So I think there's probably more truth there in Mike Tomlin's assessment that he wasn't particularly surprised, but you can still, of course, be impressed and happy to see that. But again, I think Pickett certainly, to me, as I said, I think Pickett's ready to start day one, but at the least should be the number 2 for this team. So I'm glad that error was corrected, and then it was in fact just an error, not an actual decision by the team. And of course, Mitch Trubisky, as Mike Tomlin officially finally announced, although it was all but certain at that point, that Trubisky will be this team's week 1 starter. And it goes back to the question of, how long will Trubisky be in command of this team? I wrote an article this morning that said, I think Tomlin's going to have more patience and more faith in Trubisky than probably anyone else in Pittsburgh, that he's going to try to stick by him as long as he possibly can. Not that he'd be unwilling to make a change, but he will go until the, 11th hour with Trubisky before going to Pickett.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I don't expect him to have a quick hook with Mitch, and I believe I've said that all along. Now, here's the thing, though. What we look, if things don't go good for Mitch Trubisky 2 games into this thing, heck, even the second half against New England in week 2, let's say, God help them, they're 0-1 coming out of week 1, and they get into week 2 and second half are losing, by more than a touchdown to the Patriots. You're going to hear it. You're going to, you're going to hear it. I know they're going to hear it. Everybody listening to this podcast knows they're going to hear it. They're going to be Kenny Chance scaling down. Somebody might have bring out the old Cliff Stout hanging by a stick doll and change the number on that to Mitch. I mean, this is going to get brutal at some point. It's not a matter of if, it's going to get brutal from the fans calling for Pickett. It's just a matter of when. And I don't think it's going to be pretty. It's, they'll turn on Mitch as soon as they possibly can.
Mm-hmm. And that's basically why I wrote the article, because it's almost inevitable at some point, Trubisky's going to have a bad game. The team probably is not going to set the world on fire this year with an incredibly great start or something like that. If they do, then fantastic. All very good problems to have. But there'll be that bad game, and it's going to lead to calls of, let's see what Pickett can do, same old Trubisky, et cetera, et cetera. Tomlin's, of course, going to be resistant to all that. And his veteran tenureship as head coach, he's going to be able to block out all that noise. So I basically wrote that, preempting the inevitable, bench Trubisky comments that are going to happen week 2, week 4, whenever that occurs, that Tomlin is going to try to see through Trubisky as long as he possibly can before making a change.
Look, this should have, and this has been my point all along. That's why I don't have a problem with Trubisky opening the season. Let this thing kind of happen as organic as possible. Just so happened in 2004, it organically happened against the Baltimore Ravens with Maddox going down with the elbow injury. All right. I mean, it happened that way, and that's the way he got in. That's the way Ben got in, and the rest is history. For all you know, it could be the 7th snap of the opener against the Cincinnati Bengals. You just don't know this stuff. But I wouldn't go actively defining, and I don't think Tomlin is, obviously, actively defining what it looks like when Pickett finally gets into a game.
Sure.
It's one of those, Mike Tomlin says, it when you see it.
Right. And he's not going to publicly outline those things, obviously, either.
Right. And I don't even think he knows what that is in his head. It once again, it's one of those things. It's time, or as Buffer would say, it's it's time. I watch too much MMA. But you know what I'm saying there? I mean, I think we'll all know when the right time. Well, some fans won't. Some fans want him in now, but
well, I'm one of those people.
Okay, well, I think the rest of us will know when it's time.
Sure, I think Tomlin's mentality is run with Trubisky 100% until you can't run anymore, and then you make the change. It's going to be confidence in Mitch. Mitch is our guy until he isn't, and then the change gets made. And I think that certainly could happen, but it will probably take longer than a lot of fans think.
And look, every win early in the season delays that quite honestly, so, sure. There's, unless you're one of those evil people that wishes for a injury to happen, every win that the Steelers have out of the chute here prior to the bye, delays the possibility. Now, look, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but I mean, if Trubisky runs this thing into, 6 and whatever or 5 and whatever come to bye week, they're probably not, unless they're winning despite him, which we've seen that before. We've seen, the go back a couple years when Roethlisberger went down, but as long as they're not winning week in and week out despite Mitch Trubisky, that's how much longer he's going to stay in these games, or stay at least as the number one. Once again, I think we'll know when we see it that it should happen. And in my head, I really could foresee that happening maybe after the bye week.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible, but I think even then, Tomlin is going to be the last hanger on to Trubisky and really try, because this whole offseason has been about building up Trubisky, building up his confidence, having him as the guy. And he's going to, again, run with Trubisky as long as he possibly can until he just recognizes you just can't run that race anymore. So I don't know when it's going to be, but I think it will be longer than people think. And as you said, if Trubisky and his team gets off to even a decent start, even just 500 ball, they're not going to make a change at quarterback. They're going to just keep, running it with the group they have and try to, get better with the current starters. So hypothetically, let's just say this team goes 2-1 to start the season. And if those are especially wins over the Bengals and the Browns, I mean, that's going to give, Trubisky a lot of buffer and margin to struggle maybe midseason and still be the Steelers guy. So as long as this team's competitive and Trubisky's not, tanking out there, he's going to be this team's quarterback.
Right. And look, the thing with this is when you brought Trubisky in for a reason. And I think every game that you can get away with not putting Pickett in, I think actually could be better in the long run for him, at least initially.
Right. From the idea of let the quarterback sit and learn. Is that the perspective?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, do you think it's the right move for Pickett to be the number 2? Should it have been Rudolph as we thought it could be Monday?
No, I'm fine. As I said, I wouldn't have dropped my T if they had put him at number 3. It was obviously the less likely of the scenarios there, but to me, the biggest shock overall would have been if Pickett was the 1. Anything other than that, I could have seen playing out other than that. Even if Rudolph's the number 2 for like 2 games, but anything other than, I wouldn't have been shocked. I would have been more shocked had Pickett been the number 1.
Okay. I mean, I think that's fair.
Level of shockness.
But the Dave Bryan level of shockness, we're working on the patent for that. I would have been surprised if Pickett was number 3. More surprised if he was named the starter. But if it was anything other than Trubisky, Pickett, Rudolph, I would have been surprised by.
Okay.
And I'm glad that Pickett is at least the number 2. I think he should be. Sometimes I hear the national media, and I understand it's a different perspective, but I hear, Rich Eisen, who I love and respect so much, talk about, well, you just can't start Pickett week 1. He's facing the Bengals on the road. He's got the Patriots week 2 at home. I just think that's all noise. It's not relevant. I think, sometimes from a team perspective, you get scared of your own shadow of like, if you love Pickett so much that he's your number one quarterback in this class and he's your first round guy and you're going to invest so much and pin your hopes and dreams in the future on Kenny Pickett, you shouldn't be scared about him starting a week 1 game or being the number 2 at the very least and things like that. So, I mean, if you're gonna talk the talk and say that Pickett's the guy, then walk the walk and let him be the guy. And especially after, him having a fantastic preseason and probably exceeding or at least reaching and meeting expectations. I mean, to me, Matt Canada said it himself, Pickett's ready to play. So I'm glad he's at least the number 2. And again, I would have been comfortable with him as the number 1 out of the gate.
Okay. And now we just wait and see. I mean, we both have agreed all along at some point Kenny Pickett's going to play during the 2022 season and start. So it's just a matter of time, I think.
Right. But I think it will be longer than people think, barring, of course, an injury to Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, I've kind of envisioned this thing happening around the bye or not too terribly long after it.
I think it's going to be later than that, to be honest. And again, unless the team is just trash, but I don't think that's going to be the case. And of course, again, barring the injury there. All right, what else did Mike Tomlin have to say during his press conference? From an injury report standpoint, we'll have our first official injury report today. And I should mention, by the way, Paul Dehner covers the Bengals. We'll be talking with him Friday. So just a programming note there. But from an injury report standpoint, Tomlin didn't explain much, but did say that he expects Alex Highsmith to play. Highsmith has missed the back half of the summer with a rib injury. He was less certain on Deontay Johnson, saying, we'll let participation be our guide. And so Johnson, certainly one name in particular I'll be watching for on today's report, did not talk about other names like Marcus Allen, Derek Watt, Arthur Millette, Isaiah Loudermilk, Miles Killebrew. So we'll have to see what their status is to start the work week.
Okay, yeah, and that's that obviously first injury report happened later on today. The big thing that we'll be watching is Deontay Johnson, obviously, in that shoulder. Looking for him. I would expect him, as we said, I think on the live stream, maybe it was that I expect him on the injury report, just, and more than likely limited. Anything above that, I think obviously will be good news. And then we'll also wait and see if there's any other kind of week 1 surprises that show up on there. I mean, overall, you would think that this team is in fairly good health. Coming out of the preseason, yeah, they had Demonte Casey on IR and along with Calvin Austin and all, but outside of that, you would think they'd have a pretty good choice of guys to choose from to address. But not having Deontay Johnson for whatever reason, and specifically with a shoulder on Sunday against the Bengals would be a quite a huge development for sure. But it would be. Hopefully this is all precaution. Monday is what they call a bonus day, so why not let him kind of rest that. So here's the hoping that he shows up limited or full on the Wednesday injury report, progresses from there, and then move on.
My gut says, and that's not worth much, but it says Johnson will play in the opener. So that's my thought right now.
Okay, the Steelers did sign a wide receiver to a practice squad this morning. So makes you kind of wonder if there is any concern potentially about, and that just happened. They signed Jaquari Roberson to the practice squad and placed Hamilcar Rashed on the practice squad reserve injured list.
Okay, yeah. So something obviously happened with Rashed, and that's unfortunate there. I mean, they did only have one receiver on the practice squad, and so it kind of makes sense that they could sign another just to round out that group a little bit. But yeah, that's a good point there. We'll have to wait and see. I think Roberson was with Dallas most recently, and so I don't know much about his game beyond that. But adding a practice squad name,
right.
Speaking of practice squad, I should mention briefly the Steelers did round out their practice squad on Monday, signing a couple of veterans in Andrew Adams and Josh Jackson. Jackson, a former pedigree guy, second-round pick out of Iowa with the Packers. They also brought back outside linebacker Delonte Scott, who was with the team during training camp. So their practice squad now with the Roberson move is still at the max of 16.
Yes, and those are some interesting additions, right?
Yeah, we talked about, you talked about, will they add some veteran guys? I think it's good to get some veteran experience in that secondary. Jackson's played, a fair amount. Adams has certainly played a lot as well. He's a bit older than Josh Jackson. So you add in Elijah Riley, who's got experience as well. I'm not surprised by them going with some outside guys and getting some experienced players at that when it comes to the secondary.
Right. And look, there's a couple of guys I think that, and someone had asked us, I think during the live stream, who are a couple of guys that we're kind of excited about or being on the practice squad. And I think, a couple of those veteran guys, obviously, getting Mark Gilbert back. I was excited to see that happen. I don't know if anything will come of him, but I wouldn't be surprised if you saw Mark Gilbert up on the 53-man active roster at some point this season. I think James Pierre better be looking over his shoulder. I'll tell you that, because Gilbert can also, I believe, do some work as a gunner on top of it there. Now, Elijah Riley was another guy that kind of caught my fancy there. These, couple of these experienced secondary guys are two guys that, depending on how quick they can catch the moving train, maybe see some elevation time, if you will. And then the tight end Rig, that's a really Mike Tomlin, sort of a Planet Theory kind of guy. Guys that kind of size that can move like him and that can move furniture like him are always intriguing.
Right. I think you've talked about Rig a little bit, and I think he's basically Zach Gentry insurance, because they really saw the value of what Gentry brought as almost that 6 offensive lineman, that really unique build that can, take on base 4-3 ends and against even fronts and teams like that. And if you lost Gentry, obviously Connor Hayward can't do that. You don't have another great option behind that. And so Rig has a similar build and profile as Zach Gentry. So I think that was the catalyst and motivation to add a guy like Justin Rigg over Kevin Rader, who's a good blocker, but doesn't have quite the size, the power forward looking body that a Gentry or a Justin Rigg has.
Yeah, Rigg looks like he moves a little bit, more fluent. What was his, did you look at his RAS? What's his first Rigg first name?
Justin Rigg. I don't know his RAF score. I don't know how he tested coming out exactly out of Kentucky. I can pull up at least what he tested as coming out. I don't know if it was especially good. Looks like no 40 time with a hamstring, 32.5-inch vert, 9.9 broad. The shuttle times are decent, 7.15 3 cone, 4.55 short shuttle. Probably average overall. Looks
like an overall RAS of 6.56. I've seen worse from tight ends that size.
Yeah, so again, hopefully you won't have to see him, because if you do, that probably means that Zach Gentry went down.
6057. Why do you like using those funny numbers, Alex?
Yeah, some people thought anyway they were misunderstanding what the numbers mean.
Just to give everybody a quick refresher here, the way the draft and the combine or the combine and the pro days and all go, the height comes in 4 numbers, and it's done so you can get an easy read on 1/8 of an inches. Or 1/8 of inches in there. So if you see something like this, Justin Rigg, I believe his pro day was measured in at 6.057. That would be 6'5" and 7/8. So when you see that kind of stuff, that's the only way I post now, and I've done that for years. Even when writing up regular news signings and stuff, I use the 4-digit number in there in height. I know that drives maybe some people crazy, but that's the way I do it. And I know you do it, at least on Twitter as well.
I was pretty resistant to it, but I've now joined the fray about how to write those things out. But yeah, you explained that well. 6.057 just means 6'5" and 7/8. Essentially, just call him 6'6". That's basically what he is.
No, he's 6'5" and 7/8.
All right, fair enough. I would have gotten less pushback had I just said he's about 6'6". Anyway, let's see. Going forward here, what else Mike Tomlin had to say to confirm that Kevin Dotson will be this team's starting left guard over Kendrick Green. I'm sure you were glad you were sitting down for that revelation.
I didn't drop my teeth for that one. I hope there's no clerical error in that one.
Right. No clerical error there. All straight. And Mike Tomlin asked why that was. He said, quote, He played better than KG, and it's as simple as that. And truly, it is as simple as that. Dotson was the better option. You could not go into the season with Kendrick Green as your starting left guard, and now he's likely to be a weekly inactive. Green is to start the year.
We'll see. I hope so. That's the way I would go with this right now is get Kendrick Green as the inactive. Had obviously some nice words about Jaylen Warren and how he's done all the things that they've asked him so far. Throughout training camp into preseason, talked about Miles Jack and what that guy's a linebacker basically every hour of the day, and how the get to know process was extremely fun from Mike Tomlin with Miles Jack. He talked about was asked in so many words how some of these guys, is the loss of KZ going to prevent you from doing some of the things that you wanted to do in the secondary? Now, I would have liked to have the old truth serum hooked up to Mike Tomlin during this answer. He says, KZ is done, and I'm paraphrasing here. KZ done, certainly did some nice things throughout the process and on into the preseason, but we weren't at the point where we had defined roles. Oh, you're lying. Casey really did a great job there, and I think that's one of the kind of understated. Look, are we going to look back and say, man, if only this team had Deontay Casey the first 5 weeks of the season, it would have been a lot different? No, this is not a Joe Haig moment, if you will. And I'm obviously being funny there, because even though we both don't care for the loss of Joe Haig, it's not a season-defining decision there. But when you start adding up all these little decisions, I don't know. But anyway, and obviously KZ was an injury and not a decision there. But it really will be interesting to see how they kind of piecemeal this thing together until KZ does get back.
Yeah, I think Tomlin's being honest in the sense of it doesn't have to change Pittsburgh's plans when you talk about that 3 safety package, which was going to be KZ's primary way to see the field to begin the year. They were doing the 3 safety stuff last year with Miles Killebrew, so they were doing it with different people. Now, how effective would you be? And then Killebrew, of course, has been hurt and not quite sure what's going on there. And KZ, to me, the better option, the more athletic guy, the better coverage guy overall than a Miles Killebrew. So, are they going to be as effective at it is a separate question, but could they still do some of the things they were doing, the big nickel, the big base defense where they would have just 1 cornerback and 3 safeties on the field? They can still do those things. It's just a question of, is it going to be as effective?
Correct.
So I think that's the framing that I would kind of couch the KZ injury there, but certainly that was a blow to depth. And whenever injuries strike, once the season begins, you're going to really wish Casey was healthy and available, because he could plug a lot of holes in the secondary.
I agree. And he can't get back soon enough.
Right. Should be back sometime this year, at least. What else did Tomlin have to say? I think that was basically the bulk of what Tomlin had to disclose in his first press conference of the year. Unsure of what role Malik Reed and Jesse Davis will have, but that was pretty much just standard Tomlin code speak. They always expect Reed to be the rotational number 3 and Davis to be a backup guard and maybe some work at tackle as well.
Yeah, and Alex Highsmith should be good to go for the opener. It will be interesting to see how, what are you thinking about Malik Reed? About 15 snaps?
It's usually a little bit more than that. I think it's going to be closer, especially for a first game. Highsmith's missed some time. Conditioning might be a bit of an issue. You might see in that 25-ish range, I think, with Malik Reed. We'll see. It just depends on how many snaps the Bengals have as well, obviously.
Let's see. Talked about captainship. Obviously talked about TJ and how Go ahead.
I did like, I think you referenced it briefly earlier, Mike Tomlin's comments on Miles Jack. Just the phrasing, the wordplay of Mike Tomlin saying, quote, man, he's a linebacker. He's a linebacker at all times, 24 hours a day. Just the way that phrase made me laugh. I'll sometime later this week, I'll have an interview with Charles Burton. I just conducted that yesterday. He was a Steelers intern coach this summer for about 2 weeks in training camp, and he was working with the inside linebackers with Brian Flores, and he raved about Miles Jack and just a job that he's done and just how well-rounded he is and smart he is and those kind of things. So that was good to hear that from somebody that was worked with him every single day during training camp, and to hear about Miles Jack, and of course to watch Jack play this summer. Pittsburgh's got a good one with Miles Jack.
I also enjoyed, they tried to ask him about, I haven't read this outside. Maybe you have, Cincinnati maybe hanging a banner or something like that, honoring their team from last year. I guess they're expected to do something along those lines on Sunday at Paycom Stadium.
Name, right?
Yeah. Paycom Stadium. I'm going to have to start rolling that off my tongue instead of Paul Brown Stadium. But basically, has he been using that as any motivation or whatnot? And Tomlin's response was quite classic. He says, I don't go for the low-hanging fruit. He says, I really don't. It's a football game. We'll be there. That's motivation enough with professionals. It's divisional play. It's the regular season. What else do you need? So I did enjoy that response from Tomlin.
Yeah, that is classic Tomlin there. So anything else that he had to say that you want to share on the podcast?
Terrell Austin being asked about upstairs or downstairs, and Tomlin said he's upstairs and downstairs throughout this process. Haven't decided what's going to be this week, and he was asked, are there pros and cons to each? And he says there are, but I'm not going to outline them. But there are. What would you view as the more positives of one over the other?
If you're upstairs, obviously you have a better view of the field, the all 22, the bird's eye view, and you can see some of those things a bit clearer than you can standing there directly on the sidelines. I generally like my coordinators, and not that Austin's probably calling plays because Tomlin likely is, but I like to have those guys that are really more in command and charged to be down on the field, to really be able to look a guy in the eye, have a conversation with somebody that's not on the phone, and those kinds of things. And so I generally am a bit more old school, where I want some of those really key names to be down on the field. But, they know better than I do in that regard. So whatever they decide is fine.
Yeah, look, I come from the view of I like the defensive coordinator on the field, and I really kind of like the offensive coordinator up in the air,
Okay. I know Austin has been upstairs previously, so that's maybe a bit more natural to him, but his role may have changed. So we'll see. I know Canada's up in the booth, but so I wouldn't ideally like to have both of my, de facto coordinators be upstairs. But again, whatever they want to do is fine with me.
Okay.
Dave, Pittsburgh also had some news today with some cap space, restructuring the contract of TJ Watt. We talked about that. I know on the Monday live stream about, would they do that kind of deal? You've been hinting at the math, maybe signaling they would do something with that Watt contract. Do you want to explain what exactly they did and the implications of that?
Yeah, let me tell you, let me set that up a little bit better for you on top of it there, because of a couple of things that have happened that really kind of necessitated a small restructure to happen. We talked about the kind of right in that area, kind of will they or won't they with Watt? I have projected all off season, much to the being criticized by others, that I thought they would probably want to carry about a $9 million buffer go into the season with. Some people say, oh no, you're overshooting $4 million. So, I still roll with my numbers and all like that, but was open to the fact that I could be wrong. But that it could be lower than that. But here's a couple of things that have happened really that kind of necessitated that. We talked about Marcus Allen as part of the cut down process and manipulation of the initial 53-man roster. Would they bring Marcus Allen back at a lower number? They did not. They brought Marcus Allen back at his that speaks volumes about the organization.
Right. The character. For sure.
Because if I'm sitting in that seat, I'm not sure.
That's what we were talking about. We were like, we can get Allen back for half the price, save this money. And kudos to Pittsburgh.
Maybe that says something about my character.
It says more about us than it does them.
But maybe we're not that kind of people, Alex. But they brought him back at 2.4. Look, you got to tip your hat to that. And because of that, I dedicated my whole. It was going to be a whole terrible take dedicated just to Marcus Allen, but I figured that wouldn't go over as well as maybe dedicating to just, how much they value their special teams guys. And I covered the salaries, and I covered that Marcus Allen news all in that. But I mean, this is a situation with, man, they really do value their special teams guys, man. You got Marcus Allen earning $2.433 million. He missed, how many practices did he make before he suffered that hamstring injury, Alex?
I'd have to go back and look. He probably
1, 2, 3.
How many did he actually practice in, you asked?
Yeah.
5, 6 maybe.
All right. And but that was how many before going down with the injury? Or did he? Because
that's what I'm saying. He practiced probably the first 5 or 6 practices and then had the hamstring injury. Roughly, yeah. I
mean, this is a guy that didn't play during the preseason, and we kind of wondered what's going to happen with him. And $2.433 million for basically, and he's a special teams guy. I mean, if he has to see the field on the defensive side of the football field, if you probably don't want to know the reason why, what led to that. B, you probably don't want to see it anyway. But the fact that they're paying him $2.433 million to be an up back, or 2.445, I should say. What was his number real quick? I'm looking at Malik Reed right now. With Allen, it was $2.54 million. And that's the same amount that Miles Boykin's making. And let's face it, Boykin, sure, he'll see some snaps maybe on the offensive side of football a little bit as the season progresses, but they're going to be few and far between. And you're mostly going to see that guy out there on the punt team being a gunner there. But anyway, I was kind of calculating on Marcus Allen coming back. I gotta be honest with you. I thought they might bring him back on, basically on a minimum deal there. So the fact that they're using a little bit of extra cap space there, kind of plays into the definite needed decision for them to restructure the contract of T.J. Watt. They did that. It has not hit the NFLPA yet, but Ian Rappaport reported Wednesday morning, creates $6.75 million in cap space. I must be a good teacher for that Matthew Marksy kid, because he wrote this up this morning as I was still struggling to pull my old back out of bed. But he hit it. They took $9 million of the $24 million base salary that TJ Watt was on the books for, took $9 million of that 24 and turned it into a signing bonus there. And that created $6.75 million in cap space. If you want a more realistic look at where this team is right now. Now this obviously does not include there's 2 very tiny outstanding injury settlements coming in at some point. We'll have to see. You got an extra guy in the practice squad now. So that's going to eat into it, a little bit there. But right around $8.9 million in salary cap space entering the 2022 season. I said it would be 9. I apologize. I was wrong and I overshot. So that means I do not win anything of the Showcase Showdown.
Oh yeah,
right?
you're going Price is Right style. You went over, right? So,
I went over, right? So
yeah,
I don't win at all here, do I?
No, you did a great job. I mean, you were off by barely anything, a rounding error essentially. So you called that. I mean, I think you have a pretty good idea of what Omar Khan wants to do. So kudos to you, I think, for being on top of that before it even ever officially happened. And
look, they can roll over any. People say, I hate that they had to go to T.J. Watt and get a restructure done. Look, freeing up 6 points. This team had to restructure to free up just $6.75 million in cap space. A lot of you should be take the rest of the day off and throw a parade We haven't seen any kind of that stuff in a long time, and they can obviously, anything that's left over from this year, they can roll over, and that number will hopefully be 5 or 6 million, because here's the hoping that they don't have a lot of injuries, don't have to go outside and make a lot of signings or anything like that. So I would look for probably right around, I don't know, 4.5 to, $5.5 million of them being able to roll over of leftover cap space into 2023.
Now, some will idly speculate this means a big move is coming, that Omar Khan has something crazy up his sleeve, a big trade, a signing. You don't anticipate any of that happening, do you?
No, I mean, could they still make a signing? I mean, look, at this point anyway, what are you going to sign, and who is he going to replace, and what's going to be the displacement of that? I mean, are you going to really sign a guy with a $4 million cap charge in 2022 at this point? Probably not. Right. And even if you did, there's going to be a displacement amount somewhere in there, whether a guy going to IR on maybe a split salary or something like that, happening. But I if anything comes, it's going to be like a veteran offensive lineman that, at a $1.5 million cap charge at this point, you would think.
Yeah, it's not going to be, some people said, they're going to bring in Eric Fisher or some tackle, and I don't see that happening.
Right. I mean, it could. I mean, you have the cap space to do it, and that's why they create this kind of buffer, because you never know what's going to happen. You've obviously got your weekly elevations that you got to cover. Somebody might go down injured. You might have to go during the season and go get a guy with a $4 million cap charge. But I'm talking between now and Sunday.
Same.
No, I wouldn't expect anything to happen.
Right. That's what I was getting at. Who knows what could happen week 4, week 8,
right.
Week 12, but for the here and now to start the year, this is the roster. These are the guys, and they go from there.
Right, and that's why you want to have this buffer in place, so you don't have to go to any player during the season and say, come on upstairs. I mean, they could, and that's one of the differences we were kind of wondering about Omar Khan, right, was, how much more different will he do things other than Culver? Will he skate with will he go into the season with $2.5 million in cap space and say, I'll just restructure a contract as needed? Well, why wouldn't you set yourself up to get all that work done out of the way now when you can roll that cap space over?
Exactly. So there you go. That's the latest update on this cap space. And that they shouldn't have to do anything with anybody else, right? This should be at the room they needed, and they should be done from there, correct? Yeah,
this should be it. I mean, look, you still got these procedural things like what just happened with the practice squad movement to IR, and that and injury settlements. 2 small injury settlements still have to hit, but I mean, this is it, brother. I mean, roughly a little more than 8.9 or right around $8.9 million in cap space going into the regular season.
All right, Dave, anything else you want to touch on here? I think we hit on all the big points we wanted to talk about today. Tomlin, Watt, Franco, anything we're missing?
We'll get more into our season predictions for this team after we talk to Paul on Friday, and we'll make we're trying to milk the living out of this. But anyway, within all that, just a quick overview frame with the season starting on Thursday night. Do you expect the Steelers to make the playoffs?
That's not my expectation right now. I think they'll be competitive. I think they'll generally be in the hunt because they always are. They're always finding a way to be incredibly resilient and just overcome and, climb out of holes and just exceed expectations, essentially, in terms of some regular season play when there are doubters and good reasons to doubt this team. But that's not my expectation right now, just given the difficulty of the AFC North, the AFC at large, and question marks, really giant question marks along the offensive line, quarterback play that I think will have its moments, but be volatile overall. So short answer is that's not my thought right now.
It's not my thought either. If Now, I have disagreed a lot with the major media over the years about, this is the year that the Steelers, don't make the playoffs or they losing season of Mike Tomlin and all like that. I've kind of have bucked that now. Look, last year, you just got to get in, right? It doesn't matter how you get in, just get in. And they just got in last year, and they almost got in the year they lost Roethlisberger. I guess where I'm going with this is how many wins is Mike Tomlin worth? And how many losses is Mike Tomlin worth?
Well, I think he's certainly worth more wins than losses. I don't have a formula. There is no, baseball WAR stat that I can attribute to Mike Tomlin. He's probably
Mike Tomlin factor. I mean,
right.
You agreed to some level there is a Mike Tomlin factor, or is that a myth?
No, I mean, it's obviously impossible to quantify, but I think it is real. I think there's a rallying effect, a buy-in effect, a never say never kind of approach that Tomlin has that keeps guys hungry and battling and never counting themselves out. I mean, he's never lost the locker room his entire career. Does he have warts about his coaching mentality and approach? Sure, but the best thing you can say about him is that he's never lost that locker room for a second in his entire tenure as the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach. And that's why this team is so resilient, is able to dig themselves out of holes and overcome adversity and obstacles and things like that. So what's that worth in terms of actual wins? 1 or 2, maybe. I mean, it's not going to be 5. It's not going to be 0, I don't think, but I think it's worth something.
I have this number written down, 1.65.
Where does that come from?
Just doing what I do best, Alex. Overthink stuff.
Okay.
As my wife says, man, you should be winning a lot more money with these bookies and in fantasy football because you know way too much information. She says, but you're a classic overthinker in a lot of this stuff, and that might be indeed the case here. But I was kind of thinking about it, not knowing what way we were going to talk on the podcast. Just kind of thinking about it last night. I'd like to think that Mike Tomlin is worth maybe 1.65 wins a season.
All right. I mean,
above
that
average
seems fair. Above. All right. We're gonna put that one aside. My question for you about, based on where you were at headed into the summer, and then as you've gone through training camp and the preseason, do you feel any differently about this team? Any aspect of this team you feel better or worse about, or just in general, do you have a different feeling, positive or negative, on the team's outlook this season now compared to, say, where you were at in June?
0.
I'm kind of the same.
0.0000 different. No, I don't feel much different. If anything, I feel a little bit worse about this team.
Is that because of the O-line? Why do you feel worse?
Because of the O-line and because of the loss of Casey. And once again, I don't want to put too much on, but I was really liking. I think that one person alone gives you confidence to do maybe some more things with Minkah Fitzpatrick and even Terrell Edmonds to some degree, moving those guys around there and maybe surprising some people over. Look, I went into the training camp really kind of concerned about Tyson Alualu, but I think he's done well. I wanted to see Larry Ogunjobi actually get back on the field and do stuff. He did that. So that's a positive there. I think Miles Jack, overall, I think this defense is going to be fine. I think, as we've said all along there, if this team wins games, a lot of games, more than 8 games, then their defense is going to have a large part in that, I feel. And let me tell you something else. This special teams, and we just talked about this just a moment ago, and I dedicated a terrible take to it on Tuesday there. And Mike Tomlin we didn't even hit on this. Mike Tomlin talked about that during his Tuesday press conference as well too. Looking back at things that led to this team beating the Buffalo Bills in Week 1 last year, when all odds were against them. Man, and what did we learn over the weekend with college football, Alex? I mean,
special teams matters.
Special teams matters. And if there's one pushback we get from quote unquote diehard, I guess, terrible podcast listeners and all like that, you guys put too much emphasis on special teams. We're not the ones putting the emphasis on it. We're trying to tell people that the Steelers put a lot of emphasis on it. And I think my terrible take on Tuesday helps kind of outline the obvious even more. And I mean, just go back to week 1 of last season as a reflection of that. If they can steal some points in like 2 or 3 games this year, then that could be enough with if this defense is playing well to turn the tide in those 2 or 3 games. And it could take a season that maybe some have them going, I don't know, 7-10 or 8-9, and then turn it into a 9 or 10 win team because of that. They're going to need that if they're going to win games. Because I am not, and you're probably not either. I'm not convinced on a week in, week out basis that this offense can put up 23, 24 points a week. Even 22, if they win some games that they probably shouldn't win, they might do so with 22 or 23 points. And that's why I think this defense has got to play lights out. It's got to be who we hope this unit is. And I think the special teams got to turn a couple of games around as well, too.
Definitely. I mean, I've mentioned the importance of Chris Boswell and Presley Harvin. It's so I'm very happy this team has an elite level kicker in Boz, and he has to play at that level again this year because there are going to be so many times where red zone drives stall out. Look at the Lions game. I mean, Boswell went 4 for 5 and they were in the red zone. They couldn't finish those drives off. They have to get better at that. Obviously, you can't always kick field goals and expect to compete against the Chiefs and the Bills and the Bengals of the world. But having that's going to be valuable and important. And when we talk about the Steelers defense, you talk about the progression there. The first member of the Steelers defense is not TJ Watt. It's not Cam Hayward. It's not Minka Fitzpatrick. It's Presley Harvin about what he can do from a field position standpoint, field flipping standpoint, get good net punts. The coverage team has to do their job as well. And so that's the battle that Pittsburgh's going to be running this year. Field position, starting with Harvin, Boswell being able to put 3 points on the board consistently when the offense stalls out. I think the specialists this year, they're always important, of course, but even more so this year, especially Harvin.
The Steelers will not win more than blank games in 2022. Let's end on that to kind of tease things up here. The Steelers.
Well, that's gonna tell me my prediction for the year. I don't want to give away my prediction. Right. I have a number. Do you have a number in mind for how many games you think this team's going to win?
Yes.
Okay, me too. We might be. I feel like we're going to be pretty similar on that, but I want to save that for Friday's show.
Okay. All right.
I do want to give some quick stats of the weird preview. I like doing that before every year, just to talk about some things we'll be looking for. Just to think, it basically was just here's TJ Watt's crazy stats. Like that was the whole article. Has a chance to become the first player ever to lead the league in sacks 3 years in a row. He needs just 9 to become the Steelers' all-time sack leader. I mean, that's just crazy to think about overall. Cam Hayward is only 9.5 sacks away from tying Joe Green, 10 from tying LC Greenwood. So kind of crazy to think about as well. My favorite stat overall is we're rooting even more so than usual for Tom Brady to get sacked this year, Dave. If he gets sacked 12 times, he will again become the most sacked quarterback in NFL history. Ben is currently number 1, the most sacked quarterback ever. Brady is 11 behind him, needs 12 to become the most sacked. And it's crazy because that could happen in Pittsburgh. When Tampa Bay comes to Pittsburgh week 6, I think it's plausible that Brady gets sacked a couple times in that game, that O-line's had injuries. I think Brady may quote unquote break that record in Pittsburgh.
Maybe Ben will be there to see it.
Maybe so. So
how apropos would that be?
I know, right? I mean, he was sacked 9 times through 6 weeks, 6 games last year. And so with a bad offensive line, maybe we get to that. So I'm silently rooting for that. And Mike Tomlin's first victory of the year will put him at 155 in his career. That would be 18th most of all time, breaking a tie with Joe Gibbs, who Tomlin said he kind of idolized growing up. So that hopefully that first victory comes against the Bengals, and that'll break the tie with Joe Gibbs.
What's been the most pleasant surprise we just talked about, you said, David, how much different are you from on this team from, where they started to where they are now and all like that. But I mean, kind of digging finer into that. What has been some of the kind of the bigger, more notable things that surprise? I know with me, Jaylen Warren, and I liked him. The physicality and all that college tape coming out and all like that as an undrafted and all, but I didn't foresee us talking as much about him as we ended up talking about him. And then obviously him ultimately making the 53-man roster. I think that's a great story there, and a little bit surprised. And, Mark Robinson, I think is kind of the other one there. That was a little bit uplifting and surprising. I mean, don't get me wrong. We can't sit here like some of the media guys go and say, it played out exactly the way I thought it would. So anything kind of along those lines that you'd like to highlight on?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It never plays out exactly the way that you thought it would. I thought Casey wouldn't be all that good.
Oh, that's another.
He was fantastic.
Casey was good, very good. Yeah, that's another one.
In terms of the big picture stuff about what really surprised me from a positional group standpoint or a unit standpoint, probably not much. I'm generally with you that nothing stuck out too, not so much better or so much worse that it really surprised me. Obviously, the offensive line, the struggles there, that was notable. The skill positions, the depth of the receiver room, you had some talented guys, and George Pickens, I didn't know quite where Pickens would be at from a learning curve standpoint. Knew the talent there was immense, but to see him pick things up pretty quickly, that was good. Gunnar Olszewski looking really good this summer for a guy who was not a receiver in college, played DB, really hadn't been used as a receiver much in New England, pretty much a primary return guy. That was positive to see. I do like the overall depth and quality and experience and versatility in the secondary with what Trey Norwood can do, what a Cam Sutton can do. I think it's going to unlock Minkah Fitzpatrick a bit more in terms of being able to do post-snap rotations and things like that. So I do like that group. And Casey will come back, let's say, by midseason and be a valuable asset there as well. So again, big picture, I'm with you. My thoughts are generally the same. It obviously was nice to see the quarterbacks play well. They all played well. How much will that carry over to the regular season remains to be seen. But I'd probably say just really getting a good solid footing for the quality and the depth at the skill positions, and the quality and depth in the secondary stuck out to me the most.
I was hoping the offensive line would be a little bit better than what we've seen, and I hope that even kind of after the fact, after the James Daniels and the Mason Cole, I kind of hope that if they made any more additions, they would have been a little bit more notable than what they were. I mean, we knew what was going to happen with Trent Scott. I mean, just enough writing was on the wall there. I hope that when and if Jesse Davis has to play some snaps, that it's at guard and not very long, and just hope this offensive line stays healthy and can gel and get a little bit better than what they are now, because they're not going to have, and Mike Tomlin said as much, it's still going to take some time for this to happen. And the problem is at this time, you don't have a lot of time,
Right.
Are you going to be staring down the barrel of 1-3, or 2-5 by the time some of this starts working the way, at least to an acceptable level here, because this team's got to run the football, man. They got to,
Right. I mean, it's an obvious point, but it's not like baseball where you can have the first month and work things out. You don't get the first month to just,
right,
work out the kinks. I mean, obviously this team did go 1-3 last year. They climb out of it, but you have 2 divisional games to start the year. Those are even more critical than they get any given game generally is. And you just don't want to be in that deep hole again.
All right. Email machine. You ready?
Yep, let's get to reader emos and close out today's show. By the way, Emmanuel Sanders announcing his retirement. Former Steelers receiver Manny Sanders officially hanging up his cleats. Obviously, been a while since he's been in Pittsburgh, but part of that Young Money crew way back when.
All right, let's see here. Jay Smith's back. Remember, he's the Malik Reed fan. Okay. We asked him what kind of sack totals he thought. He says, I'm putting Malik sack number at 5. He says, with the attention TJ and Cam get, Malik is certainly guaranteed 2 to 3 non-quality sacks, he says. So he wanted, I guess he's poking fun at you at the non-quality sacks. Look, that's real. I when I look at a sack reel, man, I got to be honest with you. I go through there and I look at which ones are kind of higher quality in there. So anyway, he thinks 5 is going to be the number for Malik Reed.
I think I was at 3 or 4. I want to say I said.
Yeah.
So we're basically rowing the same boat there. I'd like to think.
Taylor Carpenter writes in, David Knox, is it me or have the last few undrafted free agent classes following the draft been pretty abysmal for the Steelers? He says, I look back the last 3 years and it looks like only 2 players, James Pierre 2020 and Jalen Warren 2022, have made the 53-man roster. He says, I heard you guys talk about Pittsburgh is cheap when it comes to signing these guys and have trouble competing with other teams when it comes to signing highly sought after guys for such a solid organization. It seems like they have a very dated approach. He says, I was wondering if someone on your staff could look around the league and do a study on it. Seems every time of year, it seems like we got to get these kind of emails, don't they? And we're getting into the season. We don't have time to kind of dedicate to that. Look around the rest of the year as far as paying these undrafted guys to sign, and if it corresponds to undrafted guys making those initial 53-man rosters. I mean, we could, but I think it's pretty apparent that probably now at this point how much lower below average, are the Steelers? I mean, I don't know for sure, but here's the thing, and Alex has hit on this. If they want those numbers to improve, and this is the Steelers only, then they're going to have to start spending a little bit of money here. Now, look, you have what's called kind of the rookie undrafted kind of compensation pool. And what that amount is, and I think it was like $165,000 or something this year. That's the amount of money that all your signing bonuses can total up for outside of your draft picks there. So, and even the Steelers come in, I think this year was like, I don't know, what did I say, 65,000 less than, so there's a start there. Why not spend to the
max,
the max on that? I mean, if you're still dealing with, let's say, 10 undrafted free agents, just up the signing bonus amount a little bit. And maybe you'll be able to compete a little bit harder to get some of these guys in. And then really the only other way is to guarantee, and this will really take some pulling of the teeth when it comes to Omar Khan and all, is, you have to guarantee a portion of that, of that rookie salary, and quite honestly, the Steelers don't, with even with their draft picks, from rounds, whatever, 4th or 5th on, they don't even guarantee the first years of those salaries,
Yeah.
So, I mean, now you're basically putting more value in, you're telling an undrafted guy, we got more guaranteed money tied up than we do, not to some degree, because obviously the signing bonus with the draft picks, usually supersedes or whatnot. But and this has been a rant of yours a lot longer than it is mine, Alex.
Oh, yeah. I've died on that hill for a couple of years. Honestly, the last couple classes have been better. I mean, because you've at least got the James Pierre, at least gotten hopefully something in Jalen Warren. And in some years, there've been nobody who even made the team, made the practice squad. I mean, it's just been total duds. And so lately, it's actually kind of looked a slightly bit better. In terms of the study, I mean, you would have to go down a big rabbit hole. I just looked at some of the top guarantees from UDFAs this year. I think most of them, or some of them, did not make the 53. I'm not quite sure on practice squad, but Carson Strong, highest paid undrafted player, he didn't make the team. Zach McLeod in Minnesota, he did not make the 53. Same with Noah Ellis in Philadelphia, Kevin Austin in Jacksonville. So obviously there's a risk there, and that's probably why Pittsburgh doesn't do some of this, because they know the hit rate is low. But I mean, I think just generally their structure is poor, and they're going to struggle to hit on some of these undrafted guys because they're at such a clear disadvantage when they're offering a guy $20K when he can go somewhere else and get $100K or $200K in terms of a partial base salary guarantee. And it's just hard to really get good talent that way.
Look, they got 1 out of 10 on the 53-man roster. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, at this point, I'll take that. And, Warren has some talent to stick. So if you do that every year, I mean, I won't complain. But there have been years where just the group is gone. And most of the other undrafted guys, though, are gone outright. Are there any guys in the practice squad that signed undrafted? I'm trying to think about the list this year. Yeah.
I think most of them are gone, aren't they? Hold on a minute here.
Is there anyone still even on the team, or is it, Jeter's gone, Steele's gone, the pass rushers, they didn't stick.
Practice squad. McCollum came in after the fact. Dunkel came in after the fact. Rigg, Delonte Scott was returning from the practice. No, zero of this year's undrafted free agent class made the practice squad.
So Warren's the only guy of that class that's still a Steeler, correct?
Right.
Yeah, and so that's, to me, it's good that you found Warren, but that success rate beyond that, even guys that just can't stick on the practice squad, is pretty poor.
I would agree. All right, let me see if we got any more questions in here real quick. Nicholas Gooden writes in, hey guys, after the Mike T press conference, I have a ton of questions I want to ask you, but I'm counting on a 2-hour episode Wednesday that will cover them all. He says, for real though, that was one of the best Tomlin Tuesdays I've watched in a while. Do you agree? What are each of your guys' biggest takeaways from that press conference? Nick, we covered pretty much, I guess the more notable things. I can see where Nick's probably thinking that's probably one of the better Tomlin Tuesdays in a while. So I wasn't as blown away as, man, that's a great Ritz cracker kind of the best saltine I've ever had, kind of press conference there. But I mean, it was enjoyable, and quite honestly, that might be the best press conference that you get out of Mike Tomlin for the rest of the season here. But I really, what the thing that I think highlighted it the most, Nicholas wants to know, is I thought the way that he explained the 3 quarterbacks at the top was very good. I think the way that he explained, or his retort to the Bengals and the banner, I thought that was cute and very Tomlin-esque. And then I like the comments about Miles Jack late in the press conference. So I would think those are maybe the 3 big things that stood out the most to me to the press conference. I'm not going to put it on any Hall of Fame scale of, that was a great, third greatest Tomlin press conference ever. But I can see why it probably appealed to Nick.
I mean, if you're going to give Tomlin the 165 WAR stat, you can rank the press conferences. That was like a 138 Tomlin press conference, right? I don't know. It was fine. It was just, to me, classic Tomlin. They're all pretty much the same at this point. But yeah, I thought the quarterback stuff was pretty insightful.
Mario writes in, I like Alex. I thought it said, good. This is a good thing when you know when to use commas, let's eat grandpa.
Right. The old don't use the Oxford comma that totally changes the perception.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what made me think about that. Probably just my poor upbringing and illiteracy. Mario writes in, I, like Alex, feel Kenny is ready and should start at quarterback. He says, looking at things chronologically, the Steelers signed Mitch to be a bridge quarterback. The Steelers were going to draft a developmental starter like Willis or Ritter, and he was going to sit behind Mitch this year and learn. He says that was the plan. The problem is that instead of Willis or Ritter, Kenny, who is ready to play right now, fell to the Steelers. They had no plan for Kenny because they didn't expect to get him. So now the Steelers are using the Willis Ritter plan for Kenny, which doesn't fit. He says if they knew they'd get Kenny, would the Steelers have signed Mitch? He says, I'm guessing not. All the starter reps from the spring and camp would have gone to Kenny. How much better would he be right now if that happens? So he says, so I don't agree with them making things worse by giving Kenny's game reps to Mitch. So he's trying to take the back door around this, but in so many words agrees with you. Look, that's the thing, is you can't predict drafts. And do I honestly think that they were genuinely, and they said it a couple of times, that they were surprised that Kenny fell to them? Yeah, I think they were surprised that Kenny fell to them at 20. Mm-hmm. And I don't see how you can't think that they didn't have Kenny as QB1 on their list because he was the first quarterback they took. I mean, it slaps you in the face there. So I guess in so many words, what he's asking is, and you pretty much feel they should have. They should have scrapped their plans and once they got Kenny, and Kenny should be quarterback one. It's a hypothetical in here for sure, and that's
right.
why the draft comes first because or free agency comes first, and then the draft. You just don't know what's gonna. Maybe somebody was gonna be in love with Kenny and either took him earlier or traded up to get him. Those kind of things you just can't predict in there. Now, is he right in saying that Willis or Ritter had they got either one of those guys? I suppose. But what happens if Ritter's had a pretty decent offseason, I think. I haven't paid a lot of attention to it, but I mean, could you be kind of in the same conversation maybe here with a guy like Ritter?
Potentially. As you said, there are so many hypotheticals there. I think Pittsburgh's happy with their process. They wanted to get the veteran in Trubisky because they didn't know what the draft was going to look like. They're picking 20th overall, so there's a lot of waiting and uncertainty about what quarterbacks may or may not be there. Obviously, you don't have the benefit of hindsight about the unusual nature of this quarterback class and how it got drafted. I don't think. I think they still would have signed Mitch even if they knew they were getting Pickett because you just don't know exactly what you have in Pickett until you get eyes on him in person in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform, and you want to protect yourself, not put all your eggs in one basket, even if it's a guy you're confident in Kenny Pickett. I say Pickett should be the starter now just because of the way he's played. I didn't necessarily say that back in June, because you hadn't really watched him yet. And then to the idea of, how much better would Pickett have been if Mitch wasn't there? Had he gotten more reps? He would have gotten maybe a little bit more reps, but in terms of training camp, there's a structure and a rhythm and a flow to it. He's not going to get every single, camp rep during a team drill. It'd be the 4-4-4 structure they basically run. So I don't think his reps honestly would have been increased all that much. He basically got as many reps as Trubisky did this summer. It was a pretty, close gap overall. So I don't think his play would have been much different had he gotten an extra 20 or so reps. I mean, it was quality play, and that would have been the same whether he got the reps they did or gotten just a little bit more.
All right, well put. We've got a couple other questions in here, but most of them kind of say the same thing as about, and I think it's before the clerical error came to surface. A lot of people wondering, do you think listing Rudolph as second string? This is obviously before the change. Makes him more valuable in a potential trade. I'm not going to highlight this person because obviously the situation, has changed. But in short, this emailer asks, is Khan playing mind games to secure a better trade? I saw several conspiracy. Boy, you think I wear my tinfoil hat tight, Alex? I mean, holy moly! Some of these people really had their tinfoil hat on snug here. No, I don't think listing a guy on a depth chart makes him more marketable, more onus on a team to trade for him. If for some reason a general manager is sitting there and saying, "Oh man, the Steelers put Rudolph on their second on their depth chart. They really do like him. We need a trade for him."
Get to the phones. We have to call him.
Yeah, somebody get Omar on the line now.
Right. Yeah.
That's not how all this works. And if it does, you better be back on the phone with that general manager calling him for some of his players in a hurry there. So I get how people kind of want to put lipstick on the pig here, but any lipstick used on this is wasted lipstick, I think.
I got a comment on Twitter on Monday after it was suggested and the clerical error was out there about Rudolph being the number 2, saying, well, they want Pickett as a number 3, so if Trubisky struggles, fans won't ask for Pickett. I'm like, buddy, they're gonna ask for Pickett no matter what the order is behind that. It doesn't really matter. So I mean, this is, we're not going to comment on too much because it was an error. It's been corrected. But even if Rudolph was the number 2, it would have been because of his experience coming off the bench as as that number 2 position. And that would have been the reason why he would have been the backup quarterback had that not been an error.
Man, I just don't treat Mitch like Cliff Stout, and I know that's before a lot of your time there. But Well, I got a weird feeling that come that second game against the Winger, we're going to hear some Kenny. But we'll see. And I place on a depth chart. Yeah, it was truly a clerical error.
Right. By the way, just a random comment, just seeing a report here from Jack Duffin says Joe Hague signed a 3-year contract in Cleveland. 23-24 says they're non-guaranteed, but 3-year deal worth around, looks like $8 million with the Browns.
Where is this?
I can send you the link.
At first I thought you said Joe Hayden.
No, Joe Hague. Offensive tackle Joe Hague. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know the language, and obviously there's just some more rougher details. I just sent you a DM.
Okay.
And Jesse James, a 1-year deal with Cleveland. Not the word,
This guy's a pot. I don't know. I'll have to look, but I mean, I don't know why.
We assume that years are at least correct. Though, in 3 years.
3-year, 2 non-guaranteed. Woo.
Interesting there.
Yeah. Once again, the season's not. The season didn't go out the door just because this team cut Joe Hague, but it was a kind of a head scratcher of a move based on what they have right now.
Yeah, it was. And Joe Flacco will face the Ravens on Sunday. Zach Wilson not ready to play, according to Ian Rappaport. So Flacco revenge game is all set.
Who's going to win the game Thursday night, the opener?
Give me the Rams. Rams, Bills. Ooh, that's tough.
I am going to, I'm going to take the Bills on the road to upset the Super Bowl champions there.
I'm a big Bills fan, but I'll be different. I'll say the Rams.
Okay. All right. We will be back on Friday. We will give you all of our predictions for the season. I guess Super Bowl predictions and all. Here's a little hint. I don't have the Steelers winning the Super Bowl.
Just real quick, sorry to interrupt, but this is just coming in right now. Jets head coach Robert Saleh saying that Zach Wilson won't be ready to play until at least week 4 against Pittsburgh. So Wilson's return may coincide with a meeting with the Steelers.
Okay. All right. And once again, we hope to have Paul Dehner on the show on Friday. Already talked to him previewing the Bengals game, and we got a lot of content coming out with film room stuff. I think we pulled like 6 games, all 22 preseason and last season for that. And also start looking for that to ramp up. First injury report of 2022 will be out later today on SteelersDepot.com. A lot of good content going on the site. A lot of busy people right now as well, too. So Alex and I'll be back on Friday to start tying things up in the bow and getting everybody ready for week 1, Steelers versus Bengals in Cincinnati. So follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button, upright navigational bar on top of it. So until Friday, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.